Hello, it's Miss Morgan here with a review video about the Reformations, trying to get you ready for your Reformations quiz. If you look at this map, you can see by the 1600 there were a variety of religions in Europe. This all happened starting with Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. Before Luther and the Protestant Reformation, the only Christian religion in Europe was the Catholic Church, this light brown little area, all these areas here. Now, a lot of Europe was still Catholic after the Catholic Reformation, but you can see there were a variety of religions, Christian religions in Europe. So, first up, we're going to look at Johann Tetzel, at least the actor who played him in the movie Luther, and hopefully that name sounds familiar. Who was he? Well, hopefully you remember he was a Catholic priest and he was selling indulgences. You needed to raise money for the reason listed on your screen. And Luther saw what he was doing and wasn't happy about it and wrote the 95 Theses with his 95 arguments against indulgences, why they weren't legitimate and they had no basis in the Bible, things like that. So Johann Tetzel was the Catholic priest who inspired Luther to write the 95 Theses. Next up, 2 ways the Catholic Church was corrupt even before the Protestant Reformation. So Luther was alive at a time when people had issues with some of what the Catholic Church was doing and thought that the Catholic Church wasn't focused enough on religion. So there's 4 examples here, the way the Catholic Church was corrupt. You can see the church was really involved in politics and things that weren't focused on religion, and so people had a problem with this in the 1500s. Pause the video if you need to write a couple examples down and you need time to write them. All right, next up we have technology that weakened the power of the Catholic Church and how. So, if you think for a second, hopefully you are thinking of the printing press. All right, so it weakens the church's power because the church isn't people's only source of information, and people could learn about and read about on their own topics that weren't necessarily religion. So people learned about things other than religion and could make their own opinions about different topics. The Catholic Church has less control over people's thoughts and their knowledge. Next up, so what's the deal with the printing press and Luther's 95 Theses? Well, the printing press printed copies of the Theses, and that led more people to understand what Luther believed and hear about his ideas, and then that enabled him to get supporters for his ideas and eventually for his religion and for his fight against the Catholic Church. And just a reminder, when he started speaking out about the Catholic Church, his goal wasn't to start a new religion. He was hoping the church would change, but the church didn't really want to change like Luther wanted it to, and they clashed, and Luther got excommunicated. He was declared an outlaw. He never would take back his views, so he eventually just started his own religion because the Catholic Church didn't want to hear what he had to say and change in the ways he thought it should be changed. All right, next up we have John Calvin, and part A explains a belief that he had called predestination. I included John Cena as well because when I did John and then I started to type Calvin with Google Images and I just got the C, one of the choices that was suggested was John Cena. And you know me, I like pop culture, so I figured why not? All right, so John Calvin started his own Protestant religion, Calvinism. It was very strict. Remember, that was the one where you could be punished for laughing in church, dancing, fighting, swearing, and that type of stuff. Peasants' revolt. All right, so the peasants were inspired by Luther revolting against the church, and their revolt didn't relate to the church. They were inspired by Luther speaking out. they wanted to end their harsh lives in serfdom. And peasants and serfs are very similar. They're almost the same thing. So that's what it's referring to. Luther wasn't a fan of the peasants' revolt. It got too violent, and he thought it was important to respect authority. So he actually helped put it down in terms of he supported the princes to put down the revolt. He was not a fan of the revolt. So we have two terms here. A, heresy. Okay, so heresy is when you speak out against the church. And who was committing heresy? Luther, for speaking out against the church during Mary's reign as Queen of England, Mary Tudor, when she was Queen of England. The Protestants were considered heretics because they were practicing Protestantism, and she wanted England to be Catholic when she was monarch. And also recant. Luther was asked to recant his views, and he refused to twice, at least, officially. And that's eventually what led him to start his own church. Next up, how did Henry VIII challenge the Catholic Church? So I feel like a lot of people are on the right track with this topic and have a good sense, good understanding of what the deal was. This is why the English Reformation occurred. Henry VIII wanted his first marriage annulled. His first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon. She had a daughter, but no sons that survived, so he wanted a male heir. So the Pope refused to annul or cancel his marriage because the Pope didn't want to offend the Holy Roman Emperor, who was Catherine's nephew, and the Pope would be going against the previous Pope, who had to give Henry special permission to marry Catherine of Aragon, because Catherine of Aragon was his brother's widow. All right, Pope says no. Henry doesn't really care. Doesn't matter. He gets Parliament to pass the Act of Supremacy that makes him the head of the Church of England. So now monarchs in England are in charge of the churches in England, not the Pope. And Henry creates the Anglican Church, which might be on an upcoming slide, but that is the name of the Church of England, Anglican Church. It's a Protestant church. It still exists today. And that's what he did. That's how he challenged the church. Okay, how did the English Reformation change Europe or affect? Oh, no. Strike that from the record. How did the English Reformation affect England? Okay, or change England. We're just focusing on England here. So, monarch is now in charge of the Church of England. Oh, I was right. I didn't type Anglican Church. Official religion changed depending on which one of Henry's heirs, H-E-I-R-S, was ruling, his children, Edward, Mary, or Elizabeth. And this led to some religious confusion because it kept changing depending on the monarch. Protestants were persecuted under Mary. I already talked about that. Catholic Church lost land. I guess that's more of an effect for the Catholic Church. Henry had convents and monasteries seized in England, and then he sold them, made money for England. All right, pause the video if you need more time to write. And those are 4 ways that the English Reformation had an effect. First 3 affected England. All right, nonviolent aspect to Catholic Reformation. So, this may be hard. Catholic Reformations can be challenging to remember because, I don't know, it's just kind of dry. Anyway, nonviolent aspects. We have the Index of Forbidden Books, including books by Luther and Calvin that Catholics weren't supposed to read. Penalties for corrupt clergy. Having schools to educate the clergy so they could better defend Catholicism against when they were challenged by Protestants, and make sure people. Oh, another thing that's not on here: restating Catholic beliefs. That was something else that's not violent. That was part of the Catholic Reformation and the Catholic Church's efforts to be strong and challenge Protestantism. Okay, both Catholics and Protestants were intolerant of others, people who were different, social outcasts, Jews, well, and of each other. There were religious wars that began to occur because the Catholics and Protestants were fighting for their respective religions. All right, intolerance there. Okay, someone, a specific group being accused of being a witch. I have 4 things listed there. The main thing is they're smaller groups that are easy to pick on and kind of on the fringe of society. Next up, Jews in Italy during the Reformations lived in a separate part of the city in Venice, pressured to convert to Christianity. So you also may want to look at your notes what Luther thought of Jews and what he wanted them to do and what he thought should happen if they didn't convert to Christianity. Okay, so this is how they were treated, and not always the best way, and that's just unfortunately how history has played out with anti-Semitism, which is prejudice against Jews. All right, moving on. People willing to challenge the Catholic Church. So I previously explained how Henry VIII challenged the Catholic Church with his marriage annulment, act of supremacy. We have Martin Luther and his challenges with the 95 Theses. I've talked about this in this video as well. Not taking back his views, having different views like salvation occurs through faith, not faith in good works, which is a Catholic Church belief. Just faith is what Luther believed. John Calvin had maybe an indirect challenge to the Catholic Church because we don't have any specific examples of him clashing with the Catholic Church or him getting excommunicated. He might have, but I'd have to look that up. What we focused on is really just his beliefs. So he had more of an indirect challenge because he started his own religion and was not a part of the Catholic Church. Anyway, that's that in terms of information that I wanted to review in the video. It's the end. You should study for your quiz. You could always rewatch the video or rewind it if you're watching this on your own. I'll send you a link to this video later on. And also do any review that you're assigned, and that will help you. And good luck. Until next time, that's all I have to say. Bye.